how many people are happy in their jobs? Does your LinkedIn really matter if your resume is on point? And what are some common mistakes people make when they actually get to the interview? We're going to talk about this and so much more on today's episode with lead recruiter for Robert Half, Doug Bell. Let's get into it, Doug.
Let's do it, Rocky. I'm excited to be here and talk about the Robert Half ebook.
On today's episode of Bites and Banter, we're joined by Doug Bell, lead recruiter with Robert Half. How you doing today, Doug?
Rocky, I'm doing great.
So excited to have you on, Doug. We're going to be diving into a recently released Robert Half resource. They have so many awesome resources that are released. And this one is the job search landscape. And I'm really excited to hear kind of some of the details that came out of this. So before we dive into the weeds, can you kind of give me an overview of what is the job search landscape? What is this resource?
Yeah. So the Job Optimism ebook is it's the result of a big survey we sent out to 1,000 plus workers here in the U.S. One of the key points it mentions is that 35% of workers are planning to look for a new job the second half of 2024. It's actually down from 49% about a year ago, and even down a couple percentage points from earlier this year. So just a good outlook at what's pushing candidates towards the market or pushing candidates to stay in their job.
Cool. No, I looked through it and there's a lot of things that stood out to me. You know, Robert Half always has so many good resources throughout the year for people who are looking for a job, for hiring managers to understand how they stay competitive. One thing that really stood out, and I think there was this term that was even, I don't know if it was coined by Robert Half or it's just in the market, called the big stay, right? That was calling out a shift in people staying where they're at. What's really contributing to that? What are the numbers saying? How many people, you mentioned there's about, you said 35% looking for a new job or planning on. Is that down, up? Is that trend continuing? I'm just curious to hear you kind of unpack that a little bit because it's very different from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it seems like less and less people are starting to look for jobs right now, moving towards the end of 2024. We are still seeing some movement for people looking for new jobs. It seems to be more Gen Zers, millennials. They're like a little bit higher. I want to say 45% actually right there. But yeah, a lot of people made a change during the 2020, kind of during the pandemic. There were a ton of layoffs, as we're all aware of, and people got back in and found safety, and they're a little uneasy about making the change, but they're also happy in these roles. A lot of people took time off to figure out what they wanted to do and have realized they made the right move and ended up in a good spot. 85% of the people surveyed have reported that they have a good work-life balance. And that's something as a recruiter, when I'm talking to candidates day in and day out, what's most important to you? It's having that work-life balance.
Now that makes a lot of sense. I think definitely if you think about the kind of the dynamic shift and even what that looks like for the everyday worker, right? I think the report called out 77% of people are happy in their role, which is significant, right? And I know it's not a million people, but it's a significant sample size across multiple industries about what are people feeling, right? And obviously there's going to be some things that contribute to people being happy, like finding more competitive pay, those kind of things. One thing that stood out to me too was the flexible work location and schedule. What have you seen employers do to kind of leverage this new way of working to drive that satisfaction? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it could mean a lot of different things. For some people, it's being, if you only get 2 days of remote a week, make it a Monday and Friday so that if you want to travel somewhere, you can make a 3-day weekend out of it. You're not rushing back. So that's one big piece we're seeing a lot of. Another one, I mean, it can also be as small as, hey, I've got to pick up my kids at 3 o'clock today. Your boss not being mad at you for taking a little time off and then logging on a little bit later. Now that everybody can work remote at some level, right? I mean, a lot of companies practiced it in 2020, and sure, they're pulling people back into the office, but they're more aware that people can still succeed and be successful members of their team from home. So they're willing to, have some flexibility there on that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so it seems like the data, right? The last Robert Half conversation we had talked about some of the trends and hiring, and it seems like less fully remote jobs are available. But it seems like the market and leaders and organizations really see the value that people are putting on that flexible work, right? And it seems to be really paying off in terms of that satisfaction rate. What other factors are really contributing to this quote unquote big stay, right? To the people who are satisfied in their job. And do we anticipate seeing that trend continue?
I think we do see that trend continuing. People staying, being happy that they're in that position. One big thing we're seeing from candidates that are excited about the position they're in is competitive salary. At the end of the day, I mean, we all work for a reason, and one of them is to, pay the bills and enjoy our life when we're not at work. So having a competitive salary that has regular merit increases has been a huge piece. A good work culture, team dynamic. People don't want to just be pulled into the office just because they need to see you in the chair. Having happy hour events, team building events, whatever it may be, right? Dressed up like Robert Half. We're having a NFL kickoff this week, right? You're able to wear your favorite jersey on Friday, and we're doing a potluck as well, I think. And the little things like that can contribute to bringing people back to the office. And then another one, having a positive and supportive management team, people that understand or willing to communicate with you. Like I mentioned, just having some flexibility where it's, hey, I need to get out of work early to go take care of X, Y, and Z can be huge for people. So yeah, I think we are going to continue to see people stay, but that doesn't mean people aren't looking. And for the same reasons that people are staying, other people are looking to get that same type of stuff in their job.
Yeah, leadership and culture, I feel like are trends we continue to hear about whenever we talk to anybody about what's happening, right, in organizations and business with the change and the different dynamics, the shift. That's such a consistent thread is culture matters and the leadership, right? And I think what you're describing when I hear you talk about that was really just that transparency and that support of their employee really does matter and contribute to that satisfaction in the job. One thing that I also noticed was that it seems like people, while they're happy where they're at, right? There's not like 80% looking to necessarily find a new job. It's, in the 30s. It still showed that over 70% feel confident in their ability, their professional abilities, and actually have taken steps to increase their value and marketability for when that time comes. So I want to ask you to kind of unpack that a little bit. As people who are happy where they're at, people want to grow, right? Maybe now's not the time. Maybe they're kind of feeling things out. What can somebody be doing to really professionally prepare themselves, to upskill themselves in terms of thinking about future roles and future opportunities?
I mean, there's a million ways to unpack that one right there. I think in tech specifically, staying on top of the technology, whether it's reading a tech blog weekly, daily, even, whether it's working towards new certifications, of which companies are always unveiling new tech, so there's always something new to learn. Working towards automation, we're seeing a lot of people kind of grow their careers quicker, faster by saving their company time and money, right? Finding an old process and improving it. So they kind of all go hand in hand. Another big piece, though, I mean, networking. You never know where you're going to find a job from. So going out to events, HTI is a great example. You never know who you're going to bump into at one of these meetings. You're going to hear from a lot of different people as well. Kind of anything that can get you out of your comfort zone in the networking space. It doesn't have to be specific to your industry, even. You can go to, a sports meetup. You can go to a Toastmasters and work on your public speaking skills. Things like that are all huge. And, it's just an ability to meet new people and grow in that way. But I'd say that. And then, of course, like I said, upskilling, working towards certifications are probably the biggest things that can help somebody get ready for their next one, their next position.
I appreciate that you called out networking because, being HI local chapters, we and Robert Half's very, very supportive and involved. And we have, I feel like every chapter has somebody from Robert Half who is a part of our community. And I feel like it just brings so much value. I kind of want to unpack a piece of, I guess, maybe some misconceptions, some myths, because I think as I hear about networking, I hear about upskilling, right? One thing that stood out too was just the opportunity to do contract work, right? And you being with Robert Half being a lead recruiter, you probably do a lot of contract work, right? You probably place a lot of people, a lot of different roles, a lot of different organizations. Walk me through what are some of the things that maybe people don't really know about contract work, working with a recruiter, that or some of the things that maybe people think they know, maybe isn't necessarily true. Because I feel like there are probably a lot of different misconceptions, different thoughts around working with a recruiter and contract work. How can those two things really help you when it comes to preparing for your next role in your career. Definitely early on in your career.
Yeah, so early on in your career, and I heard this advice from somebody right when I first started at Robert Half, and I'd been asked this question by other people, by other candidates, but I heard a CISP at a random security networking event I went to. Somebody asked him, why should I take contracts, and what's the big bad thing about contracts? And it's a question that as a recruiter, you're like, oh no, how do I get through this? Because I want this person to take this opportunity because it is a good position. But this guy mentioned, and I've adapted it myself, but when you take contracts, especially, and we'll focus on the entry level side or first couple of jobs first, you're able to figure out who you want to work for, what company you want to work for, what type of position you're interested in. Colleges, kind of push you towards the first job you can get, and so does life in general. So by taking a contract and kind of taking that opportunity to see what this company is about, you get to kind of try it before you buy it as well and figure out, is this what I want to do? And if it's not, then hey, you've got a job for X amount of time. And then when it's time to pivot, it's time to pivot. So that's one piece there. As far as the myths of a recruiter, there are a lot. One I always get is not always, but pretty often is you do not owe me any money. Working with Robert Half, we're a free resource. We can certainly help you in any way. So the best way, of course, is getting you a job on the candidate side. So that's one way there. And then we do full-time positions. We do contract roles as well. So there's a couple of different ways to make that happen as far as working with recruiters.
So let me ask this question. So let's say I'm kind of early in my career, and the the less people looking for work. Number one, does that make the market more competitive, less competitive? What does that mean for the market? Before I kind of ask my second part of the question.
Yeah, I would say that the market is always competitive. In general, I mean, there's always new people coming into the market, whether it's from graduation or they're just looking for a career change and they got some certifications on their own. I think the market's always pretty tough.
So knowing that, how can a contract job, right? So you mentioned kind of feeling out, do I want to work, try before I buy? Um, you know, walk me through the process, right? And I've been through it early in my career and I found a lot of value in it. So I'm curious for our audience to kind of hear, practically speaking, what does it look like, right? I don't got to pay you anything, but for me to partner with you to maybe get some of these benefits, walk me through that process as a potential early career guy looking for to explore my options. What does that look like?
Yeah, of course. So working with us, the first thing we're probably going to have is a phone call. Maybe we'll set it up via email, but we'll at least establish that you're on the market. Let's say that we've established that. I'll ask you some quick, maybe 5 minute phone call. Maybe have a 5 minute phone call, figuring out what you've done, what you haven't done. Tell you about an opportunity that I have if I have something that I'm actively recruiting for. All with the goal though of setting up a time for you and I to meet, almost like this, except we're talking about your resume and about you for 20 minutes. But we'll do a video chat, go over your background, of course, answer any questions you have, and then if we've got a role we can get you in play for, we will. If we don't, then I'll spend time helping you in any way that I can. Whether that is resume advice, whether that's let's say you didn't have a LinkedIn profile. That's a big piece of advice that some people aren't aware of. They didn't know. They didn't fill it out to match their resume. That's another big piece that if you've got this piece of paper floating around the internet and you've got your LinkedIn profile out there, you want to make sure they match up, so that we can find you both and say, okay, this is the person we're about to meet with. This is who they know. Maybe there's some connections there, and then from there, let's say we submit you to a role. I'm going to get you ready for the interview. I'm going to walk you through how you get paid at the end of the day, I guess, if you will. And whether it's the interview through me or an interview that you found on your own, I'm happy to spend time with candidates with everything from resume feedback, like I mentioned, how to write a thank you letter, good questions to ask during an interview process, or even just a mock interview with somebody. There's a million different ways that we can help people, though.
So it's almost like recruiters are potentially acting as my free job coach, my free job mentor. I kind of hear some elements of that, right? A true partner in helping me really find that next opportunity. I want to kind of flesh some of those things you mentioned out because I think when I was going into my first really interview for a corporate job in IT, I knew nothing, right? I mean, I had some experience, a little bit of like self experience here and there, but I didn't know how to prepare a resume. I mean, this was pre LinkedIn being a big thing. I didn't really know what does the interview process look like. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? So let's start with like resume. What are things that people can do? Definitely when the market is competitive, and it's always competitive, like you said, right? And it just looks different depending on the season we're in. What are some things you can do to stand out when you're putting your resume in front of a potential employer?
Yeah, I mean, resume is your billboard on the side of the road, and you're trying to figure out what restaurant to go to with your family on vacation, right? You want everybody to stop at your seafood restaurant. So one thing that I really recommend is if you're going to have a skills section, Rocky, I want to see where you've used those skills. I don't want to just see it in a skills section because then it can be kind of vague and you could end up, I don't want to say wasting time, but if you have Linux in your skills section and I call you for a Linux role, but you just learned about Linux on your own, but your last role was a sysadmin, it doesn't mention Linux. How am I going to know? So taking those bullet points and putting them into the underneath the job with I call it the STAR method, or it is called the STAR method, excuse me. It's a really good way to write a resume. So it's situation, task, action, result. A good example of this, I'm borrowing this from a candidate I worked with recently. I'm not going to use any names or anything, of course, but he's a high level sysadmin, had done VMware moves, had done AD server moves, had built out group policy, all these really high level things. But his bullet point on his resume was maintain infrastructure for servers, desktops, phones, and network, and then plan and execute projects. Sounds really good, but if I don't know what type of projects you're running, I need an office, somebody to do an exchange migration. If you're the wrong person, time is money for everybody. I don't like to waste mine. I don't want to waste theirs. So I advised him, let's beef this up. He had a great skill section full of all these technologies that were perfect for the role. But I, talked to him and said, hey, let's work on the STAR method, explained it to him. So that went from, what did I just say? Maintain infrastructure for all servers, desktops, phones, and networks, right? Talked about that, and that became led migration of a VMware environment from a single host to a 3-node Nutanix cluster. Let's see, upgraded Windows Server infrastructure from legacy versions to Windows Server 2022 across all environments. This upgrade increased system stability and security, ensuring compliance with modern standards. So those type of detailed, action-oriented bullet points they go pretty far for people. You kind of want to show the ROI that hiring Rocky can get you X in your company as well.
I love that. I love that. So it's really, I wish somebody would have told me this when I was younger. Now I'm happy where I'm at now. Like I love my job, but if I would have known when I was younger to, because how many times I'm just curious, I wonder how many times you talk to a candidate or somebody's working on their resume and they don't think about that result piece, right? Think about what skills do I have? Right? Well, I know Linux, like I know VoIP, right? I know this, I know that, but what have you done with it? It is really, it sounds like kind of the piece that people need to focus on. Now, when you're, looking at a resume and you're getting prepared to meet with a candidate, you mentioned LinkedIn. What is LinkedIn? What should that look and feel like? Is it really that important to have a big network? Is it just that important that you have a picture? Is it important that walk me through that. What are some of the best practices when you're kind of in the market and preparing, maybe if you're not looking to maybe find an opportunity in the future? What should your LinkedIn look like, with your resume in mind as well?
It should almost look like your resume. That's probably the easiest way to answer it, right? If you're putting this bullet point on your resume, then you should probably put it in your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn they have their recruiter side where you're able to search just like you would on any other job board. So if you have a LinkedIn that just says your job titles, but no information, it makes it tougher to find your specific skill set. So that's one piece of it. Kind of try to mirror those two back and forth. And you don't have to do every single piece, but at least list the technologies that you've worked with on there. Another one, professional headshot. It's not the end all be all, but it does help. It's you got a nice picture up there, and HR sees it or the recruiter sees it, they might be more likely to remember you than the person with just a generic photo, or not a generic photo, but the no photo, right? You've got the gray icon, and it's like, okay, well, who is this? Those are probably the two big ones on that side. And then, yeah, having a network is huge. You never know who can put in a good word for you, who's connected to who. So ha- having those connections and being a member of that community is huge. Um, so many people use it for the sales side, for the IT side, to talk about just different think pieces, for posting about recruiting, posting about interview tips. There's a million different things that you can learn from LinkedIn, not to mention LinkedIn Learning as well. So yeah, I think it's an important tool to the modern job seeker, if you will.
That makes sense, and I think, Robert Half does a really good job of sharing a lot of those kind of content pieces you're talking about through their LinkedIn, right? So following, organizations like Robert Half, where you can quickly get access to the latest salary guide, right? And you can really pin down, hey, am I in a competitive market? Am I fairly compensated? Should I be looking? Should I have, there's a lot of good resources out there. So I think it's good to think about how do you tie your resume and make sure your LinkedIn matches that. And you mentioned, right, looking and digesting what's happening in the latest trends, definitely in tech. If you're into the tech space and you want to grow in tech, LinkedIn, it's all over the place. You don't really have to look hard either. It's real easy to find.
Yeah, it's all right there. Another good piece is, you apply to a job through their online portal or maybe through LinkedIn, wherever it may be. LinkedIn's an opportunity to follow up with somebody, find out who that manager is, connect with somebody, connect with a person in the position you want, ask them if they like working there. You never know who's going to be able to help you. There's everybody that, the position you're in, somebody else wants it. The position that you want, somebody else is in it, right? Everybody has been in that situation, so a lot of people are willing to help and offer insight. You just got to reach out and ask. It's just online networking, just like we were talking about, going to HDI events, going to different networking events in your area. It's just another opportunity to get out there and meet some people and try and make the world a better place and help somebody.
I love that. I think that's so true. LinkedIn is a place for community. It's not just a bunch of articles, right? It's to build that professional community. Find, you mentioned Toastmasters and HDI. I mean, there's a endless list of organizations that you can get engaged in, right? The tech space. I mean, I wouldn't know the things I know, have the relationships I have now if I wasn't involved in HDI local chapters. So I'm super thankful for that and think you're on point. Let me let me ask kind of this next phase of the process, right? Your resume's good. Your LinkedIn profile is on point. They match. You got a picture. You don't maybe have a million followers or anything crazy, but you're engaged with LinkedIn. It's clear things are matched up. You're interested in the job you're interviewing for, right? Your skills match up. I get to the interview. Maybe you're my hiring manager, Doug. I don't know. Let's just pretend you are. What are the things that I should be doing in an interview that maybe some people don't think about throughout that process?
Love this question. One of my favorite things to talk about. The easiest one: do your homework. If you know you're interviewing, go to the company you're interviewing for's website, read their about me, find the history, find any sort of fun fact, so that if they ask you a layup of a question, right, or a t-ball question, right, what do you know about this company? You've got your answer, right? I mean, it's so simple to do. From there, figure out who you're interviewing with, look them up, see, send them a connection, but on top of that, see if you're connected with anybody they're connected with. It's an easy way to break the ice. Hey, during the interview, while I was getting ready for this, Rocky, I looked you up on LinkedIn and saw you're connected with Terry. How do you know Terry? Easy conversation. They've got, kind of maybe not exactly a reference, but, now the hiring manager can reach out to that person and say, hey, how do you know them? It's kind of a little bit friendlier way to have a reference, if you will. Another one, good questions. Questions are huge. A lot of people, I mean, these are all, well, I do this type of call a lot as far as interview prep. Everybody, not everybody, but many people come prepared with what's the day to day and what's the culture and how many days off do I get type questions, right? I mean, they're all important questions, but it's all, everybody's culture is great if you ask them offhand. But having questions beyond that, the couple that I like, the first one, what's the biggest challenge on the team? You're asking them what's tough about the job. What's the thing that your teams find difficult? A question like that sets up candidates to be able to, on one side, figure out if they want to work in that type of environment, if they want to deal with that challenge. But on the other side, it gives them the opportunity to talk about how they don't see that as a challenge, or talk about how they've always wanted to do that challenge, or maybe they've dealt with a similar challenge and they were able to solve it in this way. And you can even, going back to the STAR method that we're talking about with resumes, you can apply that here, right? I had all of our end users don't know what Windows is, right? Or they all forget their passwords every single day, right? You can talk about that, right? About how, oh yeah, we've been in that situation. That's a good one. Big projects coming up. That's another good question to ask hiring managers, especially on the infrastructure side. You want to know what you're going to be working on one side. Do you want to do it? And then, to talk back to the manager, hey, I've done that, or I've done something similar. It's kind of an opportunity to show real world experience that might not have been mentioned. And then, as far as like kind of wrapping the interview up, Rocky, I think candidates should always ask what are next steps. You're usually going to get a canned answer of HR will follow up in a week, or in our world, hey, Mr. Candidate, Robert Half will let you know something soon. But following that up, this is my favorite question, and it's an aggressive one, but I like when candidates ask, and I've done this in my own job search. It's been years since I've interviewed, but I did ask it. But something along the lines of, based on the conversation today, what questions do you have about me for this position? That's a really good question to figure out, in essence, what doesn't that management team, that hiring team, like about you? This will give you the opportunity to find out what those objections are and turn them into an opportunity or a strength. It could be that the hiring manager forgot to ask you about something. It could be that you got an acronym wrong and it's been eating at you the whole interview, right? It's the last chance to right the ship before you get told yes or no after the interview. So those are a couple of things that I think candidates can do to get ready for interviews, for sure.
I think riding that ship, um, you don't think often about interviews as like, oh, did I get something wrong? Do they have question marks? And how many people leave an interview not knowing, like, what do they think, right? And so you think, like, how would you phrase that? Would it be, hey, what hesitations do you have about moving forward with me? Like what kind of phrasing could you use to really ask that direct question without coming across too aggressive, maybe?
Yeah, I think the way that you asked it is perfect. What has it been, based on our conversation today, Rocky? What hesitations do you have about me for this position, or what questions do you have about my qualifications for this role? And phrase it in a good way. I mean, you're kind of showing them that you're aware you're not perfect
Hmm.
and that you want some feedback. Rather, I hear about a lot of people getting ghosted is the popular term, or is the term. And this is kind of this is a good way to mitigate it. If you do get ghosted, or if you get a canned email with, hey, we've decided to move on with other people, this is the best way to get that feedback. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with being direct here. If you want the job, you don't have to ask for the job, but it helps to know where you stand, so that you're not sitting there, on a hope and a dream, hoping that you hear back. Kind of, you know, it's your last shot. So you might as well shoot your shot.
When you're preparing to, like, you say you see a role in LinkedIn, like, I'm really interested in that. Does it really matter if you apply through LinkedIn or if you apply directly on the website? Like, does that actually make a difference?
I'm not sure how much of a difference it does make. I think that hiring directly through the company portal is probably the best way to do it. That way it's going directly to their internal ATS rather than to an email inbox where they might have, LinkedIn sees a couple thousand applies for most positions, it feels like these days, and specifically remote roles, right? So yeah, I would say to apply directly. And then from there you can loop back to LinkedIn if you can find the hiring manager, or like I mentioned, somebody that's in the role. Send them a friendly connection with a message of, hey, just applied to this role. Would love to speak with you guys about it, and maybe list a couple reasons why you think you're a good fit. And for that, if you have a hard time writing that out, use ChatGPT, use an AI tool to say, hey, I want to write a follow-up message to a hiring manager for a position I just applied for, and here's why I think I'm a fit, and send that via LinkedIn in a few minutes.
So it doesn't necessarily matter, but the direct is preferred. Um, Now, if I'm working with a contractor, am I gonna apply through Robert Half, right? Or am I going to apply through the website? Like, what does that look like for people who are interested? They hear this idea, definitely maybe a younger crowd or people who are just getting in the market. Maybe they're trying to job change and they're like, I don't know exactly what I want in this field, but I want to explore it. I might be beneficial to, for the reasons you talked about, Doug. Like, what does that process look like? Do they have to go to Robert Half's website? Do they reach out to like find a recruiter through LinkedIn? Like, how does somebody start that process knowing maybe they don't know exactly what role they want and they want to explore kind of that outlet?
Yeah, I think, going to roberthalf.com, perfect move. Follow up with me on LinkedIn. I just applied to this role. Do the same thing you would anywhere else. And then, call into the office even. Say, hey, I'd like to speak to a recruiter for these roles. And, if you're the candidate doing that, think of it as, Rocky, you would be applying for roles directly and then working, and that's an active search, right? You're doing the work, you're going to companyx.com and looking through all their positions and applying to what you're interested in, right? But by working with a recruiting firm like Robert Half, we're able to help you have a more passive search. Hopefully, we'll find you a role. But I kind of think of it like a fishing trip. You hire a fishing boat captain. You're still cast in your own line, but instead of just you've got the first mate and the second mate throwing lines in the water, reeling it back in, and when they've got a fish on the line, they're going to tap you on the shoulder. And that's how I can help candidates in a lot of ways. Is kind of just assisting their search. Of course, I want to place everybody I can, but we want to help people get people back to work and making their jobs better. I'd say a lot of people that I might not place them the first time I meet with them. It might be their next job after this job. But, that goes back to kind of that passive search where I never know what's going to come in. And if you're interested in X thing or X pay rate or remote or hybrid, or you want to switch to an AWS role, working with the recruiter is a great way to kind of have that passive search in your back pocket so that you need to get out, you're ready to get out, or at least you have kind of a pulse on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think starting the conversation, it hurts nothing, right? You're out nothing if you have a conversation, and all you're doing is getting additional information. You're getting additional support to kind of help you through that process and navigate those waters. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, like the Robert Hass of the world, like you guys also do direct placement, right? It's not always just contract work. Like we you find people permanent jobs that aren't just temporary. And I'd be curious to know what the numbers say on contract work and how much of that actually is kind of indefinite contract work, right? Because there's just projects that don't necessarily have an end date, so those exist. Now, one thing I have heard too is this idea of if I go through a contract or I sign up for a contract through Robert Half or the likes, I'm gonna lose my insurance, my benefits. That's one thing I've heard. So I'm curious, is that true? Is that false? Like,
Yeah, we offer medical plans for our candidates on contract. We also have our FTEP program, which is another variation where it's almost a full time, or it is a full time role with Robert Half. Excuse me. Those have great benefits, and then of course the direct hire side. So we've got a couple of different ways to peel that onion, if you will, for our candidates. Yeah. And then another, I want to loop back to this. This is something from a little bit earlier, but a lot of times, like, you asked about applying to jobs. A lot of times I don't even get a chance to post a job because I've already, it's kind of like the hidden job market. Something comes in so quick where it's like, okay, well, I just met this person yesterday. Let's call them and see if they're interested, right? And the company hasn't posted. We've got great relationships with hiring managers all over the country. My team itself has been working in the Raleigh market for, I guess, a combined 30 years. So there's a lot of doors we can knock on where we know somebody and they've got, hey, we're opening up 5 roles next week. Go ahead and send us who you've got. Then we're getting people in play from there. So, kind of working with the recruiter can help in that way as well, where there might be positions you're not even aware of.
multiple heads and multiple hands and multiple people really searching for you. I just think about just this season that we've come out of, right, where it seemed like it was almost impossible to find a job, and sometimes you hear that, right? You hear people talk about like I've applied to 150 jobs and I haven't got anything back, or I've applied to 1,000, and I feel like you see these trends every once in a while. But it's just so interesting because I think as you're talking, and as I even look at the resources that Robert Half puts out, right, this job optimization ebook, it kind of alludes to like, man, there's so many perks to having somebody in your corner, right? To having a Doug in your corner to help you navigate that, right? And navigate the resume, navigate the interview. So when you do get to the interview stage, you're not just doing it on an island, right? You know what you're getting into. You have tips. You have a mock interview with your partner, which is what I would call you, Doug, right? You're my partner and you're going to help me throughout this process. And I just think, I wouldn't be where I'm at career-wise if I would have told a recruiter I don't want to talk to you. Like, I wouldn't have, or I'm not interested, right? Because so often finding an opportunity is just about saying yes to people who offer to support you in some way, right? It can't be that simple. That's kind of how growth happens, is saying yes to opportunities.
Some of the I guess biggest jumps, I mean, salary with candidates I've gotten are from candidates that I might have met, like I mentioned, a couple years ago, and didn't have something for them then, or they, maybe we didn't get a win together then, but then I had something open up, and I've stayed in touch with them, or they, we've stayed in touch with each other, and I'm aware of what they're looking for still, and I like to, I'll usually end those calls with when I'm catching up with somebody I haven't spoken to in a while. Hey, remind me, what am I calling you about these days? What technologies are interested, so that when it opens up, I can say, "Hey, I think I made your day. What do you think?" It's huge, and partnering with candidates is probably the best way to phrase it. When my candidates win, I win. My team wins. My dog's happy. I'm happy. Like life is good, and yeah, it's nice to partner with people for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's really what it is. All these myths and misconceptions, it's there it really is partnership, right? It's partnership. It's having somebody in your corner and advocating for you and helping you navigate it. So I love that. Let's walk through just anything else that, and you think about what trends, what things you see continuing, what challenges that, potential employees, people looking for a job, or even people who are, looking to hire, what are things that really stood out to you, Doug, that maybe we haven't touched on?
Why they're looking for jobs, right? We said I think 35% of people are not or are going to be looking for a job rather than 65%. Excuse me there. But the big things that have people looking are the higher salaries, better position, better benefits, perks. Higher level title or more flexibility. Those are, I think it's 52% of people would leave for a higher salary, and that goes that's a pretty, one out of every two people. That's a good number there for, as we mentioned, try to find an opportunity to partner with somebody. Also, the flexibility piece is something that I think everybody should be looking towards and trying to, find ways to get better at. Like I mentioned, being able to pick up your kids at a certain time is, it's not a hybrid job exactly, but just being human about people's searches is a big piece that, when it's not there, can push people out the door. If there's absolutely no flexibility for sick kids, things like that, or for, I've got a dog. My dog's got to go to the vet. He hurt his foot this morning. And I was like, man, am I gonna have to cancel this podcast? That would be terrible, right? So yeah, things like that are really important.
If you had to cancel, Doug, I would understand.
Yeah,
It
I
makes you
know.
feel better. Uh,
I think he got a
yeah.
splinter, but he's okay. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just so employers really need to look at those things, right? Is the pay we're offering competitive? Is the flexibility we're offering competitive? And I think that kind of loops me straight back to that key component of culture and leadership, right? If culture and leadership are in line, I feel like those other things should follow suit in most organizations, right? That matters as employers look to find people, right, with the right skills. Because again, the skills gap and the skills people are looking for, definitely in our world in the tech space, it's not like those skills are just staying the same, right? Or overly easy to find. So these things matter. These things matter.
100%. Yeah. Another thing that I mean, I've heard from a couple candidates recently that we've been working with and found positions for is, and that they were excited about is that the companies they interviewed with had a roadmap as far as, hey, you're going to come in at this and you could do this when we're going to help you get to X position, with the timeline. And that's something that, as you're it's almost like a college football recruiting move, right? Hey, you're going to come in, you're going to ride the bench for a year, and by your second year, you're going to be all conference. And that gets people excited to know that, okay, this, I'm not just here for a little bit. Like these guys have a plan for me.
That's why Arch Manning's still at Texas, right?
Yeah, I think so.
They have a plan for me. I don't need to jump to be a starter because I want to be developed, right? I think it's such a good contrast and comparison. Like, yeah, you need to hire the right people. You need to offer competitive, benefits, pay, flexibility, but that growth, right? People are looking for that growth for not only the organization, but for them. How are you going to what's in it for me? It's something we talk about all the time when it comes to service desk agent experience. Organizations have to be able to communicate what value are you getting and what value are you bringing in your role to the organization, and how are we going to enable you to bring more value. So cool. Anything else you wanted to add before I ask you one final send-off question?
I don't have anything to add right now, but I'm excited to hear what this question is.
Before I ask the question, just give me the details. Where can I find the ebook? Where can I, and we'll probably link it. I'm sure on anybody who's listening to this, will be able to find it in our description. But where can I find these resources? Where can I reach out? Maybe if I want to explore this option of contract work, those kind of things. Where do I go?
Yeah, roberthalf.com, easiest place right there. That's a great spot. Connect with the local recruiter in your area. I'm focused on the Raleigh area. Still happy to chat with people. Just might not be as helpful at finding them a job nationwide, but reach out to Google Robert Half and your area and find something, find a recruiter, reach out, send a connection on LinkedIn. And then we've also got a ton of other resources. We're releasing our salary guide in a couple of weeks now. That's a great way for candidates and hiring managers that are trying to figure out, what to hire for and what to ask for in their next role can go there. We've got great resources for interview questions. Again, why to consider contract jobs, how to work with a recruiter. We've got an awesome online catalog of different things to help people in their job search.
Awesome. I will say after reading the ebook, I am optimistic about the market and I am thrilled that people seem to be thriving and happy where they're at. So now, Doug, the final question that I'm going to ask you, same question I ask all of our guests to wrap things up. I'm going to hit rewind. I'm going to be Adam Sandler for a day. I'm going to pull out a remote and I'm going to hit rewind, and you're going to rewind time when you're talking to your younger self. And now you can make up the age, right? Whatever age you want to look at. What is some wisdom, some words of wisdom, some advice that you would give your younger self if Rocky hit the rewind button? You could go talk to your younger self.
If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. That's probably the best advice. I got that from my now wife when we first met. And what it means is, don't be complacent in your job. Find a way to get out of your comfort zone. If you're on a help desk and you're only doing one thing and you're tired of it and you want a better position, go ask somebody in your network on LinkedIn, how can I be like you? Set up that meeting, go to the networking event, go work on yourself in one way or another to try and grow. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you better is the growth, that being comfortable, being uncomfortable can really go farther. And yeah, I took a little too long to be complacent in my younger years. And yeah, figuring that out has been huge for me.
Such a truth bomb. And this is a theme we hear almost every guest, Doug. So I'll be surprised the first time this theme doesn't pop up, where it's stop being comfortable, go get it, be adaptable, right? It's different words, but it's all about that growth. And I love it. I love it. Cool. Well, I appreciate your time today, Doug. I appreciate you diving into the ebook, the details, talking about the myths of recruitment and of contract work, of interviews. What are things that make people successful? Just some really, really, really good nuggets of wisdom. I think it's going to offer a lot of value to our listeners. Anything else you want to add before we send off this episode?
No, this has been great. I really appreciate the opportunity. I guess have a great time on your vacation. Good luck out there. First trip without the family, right?
First trip without the girls. Yep.
There you go, man. Well, thank you so much. It was good to
Thanks,
catch up.
Doug.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. We will catch you on the next episode of Bites and Banter.